Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ingenteater channel. Previously, we were always carried away by the atmosphere of horror stories, full of intrigue and mystery. On this occasion, it is not much different from the previous story. To accompany you to sleep with a calm soul, and before the story begins, please comment from which country you are, and don't forget to subscribe. Hopefully, you enjoy the story on this occasion. People say silence is golden. For me, silence was oxygen. After the divorce, the layoffs, and the social exile that came with both, I didn't just want silence. I craved it so much that I was willing to follow it into places most people would instinctively avoid. Lengkong wasn't on any map worth looking at, a town forgotten by time, surviving on the memory of better decades. When I saw the rental listing online, I knew it was the one. A 2-story house on the edge of a hill overlooking dense forest. The listing said, quiet neighborhood, long-term vacancy, rent negotiable. When I met the landlord, he barely looked at me. A gaunt old man with cloudy eyes. He handed me the key and said just one thing. No one stayed there more than a week. I took it as a challenge. I should have taken it as a warning. Driving up to the house, I could feel the weight of the place before I even stepped inside. It wasn't just old. It was abandoned by intention. Curtains drawn tight like clenched fists. The gate groaned like it resented being opened. The front door stuck as if the house was thinking twice about letting me in. Inside, the air smelled stale and heavy. Dust coated every surface like skin left too long under the sun. The furniture was basic but intact, like someone had left in a hurry but expected to come back. Except no one ever did. The first night, I didn't sleep much, not because of fear, but because the silence was louder than I'd remembered. Every house has a sound, but this one, it had layers. Boards whispered when I moved, windows clicked when I exhaled, pipes sighed as if exhausted from waiting. Still, I unpacked, set up my old books in the built-in shelf, brewed coffee in the rusted pot I brought from the city, told myself I could write again. Here, heal. The house didn't resist. Not at first. But silence, I would soon learn, is not the same as peace. It was only the beginning, and even as I closed my eyes that night, something inside the walls opened theirs. I awoke at 3:11 a.m., The clock beside the bed glowed red like a wound. There was no noise, yet something had pulled me from sleep. A sensation more than a sound, the smell of soil. I sat up, squinting into the darkness. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed thicker, almost pulsing. I rubbed my eyes and got up to check the windows. Locked. I walked the hallway slowly, floorboards creaking an apology beneath my feet. As I passed the study door, I paused. It was open. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, the desk light was on, flickering. My notebook lay open. Words scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting across a page I'd left blank. 5 words. You came back. Thank you. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. The shadows seemed to lean in closer. Then behind me, from the end of the hallway, a low, guttural whisper. 1 word. Stay. I turned, heart thundering. Nothing, just a long, silent hallway, but the air had changed. The silence now felt crowded, and the house, for the first time, felt truly awake. The first morning in the house came with no sun, just a thick gray fog that hugged the trees and seemed reluctant to let go of the structure. I stood on the narrow balcony with a cup of bitter coffee and let the silence fill the gaps in my chest. No cars passed. No birds sang, just the low hum of the forest and the occasional groan from the old house as it shifted in its sleep. I started to clean, not because I cared much about tidiness, but because motion kept the mind from spiraling. Dust came off the shelves in angry clouds. Spider webs draped the corners of ceilings like neglected holiday decorations. I vacuumed, mopped, and aired out every room except the basement. The door to the cellar remained closed, its knob stiff and unwelcoming. By the second afternoon, I had claimed the study. a long, narrow room with a single window that overlooked the forest. The desk was heavy oak, untouched by time, as if it had been waiting for me. I set my laptop down, but didn't open it. Instead, I opened one of my old notebooks, the ones filled with half-poems, scribbled nightmares, and fragments of memoirs I was never brave enough to finish. The writing came slowly, but it came. Paragraphs born not of peace, but of necessity. The need to record, to unravel, to process the very act of existing in a place like this. That night, I slept deeper. Still no dreams, but at least no tossing. The house seemed pleased, until I heard the knock. It was past midnight. I sat up straight, pulse thudding. The knock came again, slow, deliberate. 3 sharp raps against the wood. I padded down the hallway barefoot, my breath shallow. The front door stood firm, undisturbed. I flipped the porch light on. Nothing. But as I turned to head back to bed, I noticed it. A single wet footprint on the wooden floor, just one, leading away from the cellar door. The morning after the footprint incident, I walked around the house like someone waiting for the floor to fall out. Everything looked the same, but felt different, heavier. The air clung to my skin, and every creak seemed deliberate, as if the house was testing my attention span. I kept going back to the cellar door. I hadn't opened it yet, but I could hear things now, faint like murmurs underwater. A slow shuffle, a distant sigh. I told myself it was plumbing. It had to be. Still, I avoided it. Instead, I focused on the walls. I had brought old paintings from the city, relics of a life I was trying to redefine. As I hung them, I noticed strange stains beneath the wallpaper, faint outlines like fingerprints, or maybe claw marks spreading from the corners of rooms. Beneath the study window, one of the wooden panels bulged outward as if something behind it was pushing. I took a break that afternoon and went into town, hoping to reset my nerves. Lengkong's main road had a bakery, a grocery, and a post office that hadn't updated its hours since the early 2000s. The townspeople were polite, but not inviting. I noticed their glances, how their conversations dipped into silence when I passed. At the bakery, an old woman rang up my loaf of bread and asked, "You're in the Hill House?" I nodded. She lowered her voice. "Don't listen to it. That's how it starts." I didn't ask her to clarify. I didn't need to. That night I sat at the desk and tried to write, but the words didn't come. Instead, I heard whispering, not from outside, from the walls, faint, rhythmic, like breath shaped into syllables. I pressed my ear to the drywall. Nothing. I leaned back. There it was again. It said my name. I spun around, heart in my throat, but the room was empty. Just the soft scratching of branches against the window. Sleep was impossible. I left the light on and sat up reading one of my old journals until the whispering stopped, or I stopped hearing it. In the margins of the page, I found something strange, a line I didn't remember writing. "It remembers you," and beneath it, a smear, like someone had run a wet finger across the ink, but I hadn't touched it. The next morning, I stood in front of the cellar door with a crowbar in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The memory of the wet footprint haunted me, not just its presence, but its direction. Something had come out of that basement. Something had walked the same floors I had. The knob resisted, but the hinges gave in with a moan that echoed like a warning. A gust of cold air slithered past me, smelling of earth and iron. I clicked on the flashlight and descended. The wooden steps creaked underfoot, some soft from rot. The walls were bare stone, weeping moisture. The air grew heavier the deeper I went, until it felt like I was wading through unseen cobwebs. Then the light found the floor, and something else. Symbols, dozens of them, carved directly into the concrete, circling a patch of darker stone at the center of the room. The carvings weren't random. They pulsed with meaning, though I didn't understand it. Spirals, eyes, jagged slashes. Around them, tiny bones, bird, rodent, maybe more, lay scattered like offerings. I swallowed hard and knelt to inspect them, flashlight beam trembling. That's when I heard it. Breathing, not mine, slow, deep, and rhythmic. It was coming from beneath the stone slab. I stumbled back, tripping on the last step and landing hard on my side. The breath continued, unaffected by my panic. I scrambled up and backed away from the center, eyes on the slab. It was rising, only slightly, maybe an inch, but enough to know it could move. Enough to know that something down there was aware of me. I ran up the stairs, every instinct screaming. As I reached the top and turned to slam the door shut, I caught one final image in the flashlight's beam. A handprint. Not human. Too long, too many joints. Burned into the stone like it had clawed from fire. I bolted it shut and wedged the crowbar through the handles. That night the whispers returned, only they weren't in the walls. They were beneath the floorboards. Sleep was impossible after the incident in the basement. Every creak in the floorboards made me sit up. Every gust of wind rattling the windows sent my heart racing. But exhaustion eventually won, and I passed out on the couch, flashlight in hand. I woke to sunlight filtering through the dusty curtains and the soft thud of something falling upstairs. I froze, listened. Nothing followed. Mustering what little courage I had, I climbed the staircase and found the source of the noise in the study. A book. It hadn't been there the night before. A weathered, leather-bound journal resting neatly in the center of my desk. No title, no name, just a faint, smoky scent and a brittle ribbon bookmark protruding from its center. I opened it. The entries were handwritten in a cramped, precise script. The first pages described dreams, vivid, disjointed fragments of impossible places and disembodied voices. The further I read, the more the entries changed. They became obsessed with the house, its shape, its sounds, the cellar. One entry stood out, dated just 5 years ago. The breathing started again last night, louder, closer. I tried to leave this morning, but the road was gone. The forest moved. I don't know how, but it did, and there's something in the basement. I saw it, its eyes reflected in the water leaking from the ceiling. I think it's wearing my face. I slammed the book shut, breath short. Whoever wrote this had lived here, possibly right before me. They hadn't just imagined the terror. I was retracing it. That evening I tried to find any record of previous tenants online, but there was nothing. No photos, no reviews, no mention of the property at all. The listing had vanished. I called the landlord, no answer, his number disconnected. The house was scrubbing itself clean of its past, and maybe of me too. I returned to the journal. As I flipped through the last pages, I found a sketch. Crude, but unmistakable. A face. My face. But twisted. Hollowed. Its mouth a perfect circle as if screaming or calling. Beneath it, a single sentence. He will write again. I dropped the book, and for a moment the air shimmered. I could hear faint scratching inside the walls, inside my head. The house wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. After the journal incident, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice that had called out to me in the hallway. The whisper wasn't just sound, it had weight, like it had curled around my spine and squeezed. The next few days blurred into each other. I tried to write, I tried to ignore the sense of something watching me. I even tried meditation, but nothing pushed back the feeling that the house was listening. Then one evening, the radio turned on by itself. It was an old tabletop model I'd found in the upstairs guest bedroom. I hadn't used it, hadn't even plugged it in, but now as I passed the study, I heard it, a thin line of static humming from the desk. I entered slowly, heart in my throat. The radio was lit, dial twitching. I reached out and turned the volume down. That's when I heard it, under the hiss. A voice. It wasn't speaking a language I knew. It was low and rough, syllables strung together like thorns. I leaned in, straining to catch a word, and then for a moment I did. My name, clear, icy, whispered through the static. I yanked the plug from the wall. The sound stopped immediately, but the house didn't return to silence. That night, the lights flickered for hours. Shadows moved where nothing should, and always just at the edge of hearing was the static, like the house was tuning itself to me. I left the radio outside the next morning. When I returned that afternoon, it was back in the study, plugged in, tuned to the same frequency. That night, I didn't sleep because I knew for the first time that the house wasn't just haunted, it was trying to communicate. It was on the 7th day that I found the locked door. It shouldn't have surprised me. Old houses always have secrets, but this door was different. It hadn't been there before. I was cleaning the upstairs hallway when I noticed it, set flush into the wall between the master bedroom and the guest room, painted the same dull off-white. But the handle, blackened brass with a floral etching, stood out. I knew every inch of this hallway. I'd passed it a dozen times, and that door had never been there. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. I reached for the handle. It was ice cold. I turned it. Locked. I pressed my ear against the wood. No sound, but I could feel something beyond it. Not presence. Pressure, like whatever was on the other side, was leaning back. That night, I dreamed of the door. In the dream, it was open. The staircase descended into soil and stone. Voices whispered from below, calling not in fear, but invitation. When I woke, I had the key in my hand. It was old, iron, ornate, a perfect match. I didn't remember finding it, didn't remember how it ended up in my grip. I didn't use it, not yet. Instead, I tucked it into the desk drawer beside the notebook, the one still covered in handwriting that wasn't mine. Over the next few days, the door became a gravity. I'd walk past it and feel my breath shorten, my chest tighten. Sometimes I'd think I heard a knock, faint, polite, from the other side. Then one morning the door was ajar, only a crack, but enough. Inside, darkness waited like water. I pushed it shut and locked it again. The key had returned to my hand, and that night, in my dream, I descended the staircase. And the whispers, they stopped, because they were waiting, because they knew I was coming. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the dreams, the way they intensified each night. Maybe it was the voice that whispered my name from the radio, now silent though I hadn't unplugged it. Maybe it was the simple fact that I couldn't bear the weight of the door anymore. So I unlocked it. The key turned easily, like it had been waiting for years. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase carved from stone, spiraling down into a yawning black. The air that rushed up was not musty or stale. It was damp and fresh, like air from a cave or a grave. I took a flashlight. I told myself I'd go down just a few steps, just to see. I went down 27, each one narrower than the last, the walls pressing close. My breath echoed in the descent. There were markings on the walls, old, charred, like someone had tried to burn something away. Then the stairs ended. I found myself in a circular chamber beneath the house. It was earthen, reinforced by rotting timber beams. Symbols were etched into every surface: floor, ceiling, walls, spirals, eyes, bones. I didn't recognize them, but I understood them. This was not a place people were meant to be. In the center of the room was a wooden chair. On it sat a bundle wrapped in burlap and string. The smell that came from it was copper and rot. I didn't want to unwrap it, but I did. Inside was a mirror, old, handheld. The glass cracked. I saw my reflection, only it wasn't just me. There was something over my shoulder. A figure, tall, thin. No eyes, just black holes where a face should be, and even as I whipped around, flashlight beams slicing through the air, there was nothing behind me. I dropped the mirror. It didn't break further, just lay there grinning. That's when I heard it. Movement above. In the house, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I ran back up the stairs 2 steps at a time, heart pounding. When I burst out into the hallway, the door slammed shut behind me. The key was gone. and so was the light in the house, every bulb, every switch. Darkness. Then the whisper came again, closer, so much closer. Welcome back. The power never came back on. I tried everything, checked the breaker, called the utility company from my cell, no signal, even wandered into town. But when I arrived, it was as if Lengkong had never existed. Just forest, just emptiness, like the house had erased the town. I returned in the dark. That night, I lit every candle I could find, clustering them into circles of fragile light in each room. But it didn't help. The darkness pressed in harder now, more alive than before. Not absence, but presence. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not above me, not below. Inside my room. I didn't move. I couldn't. My limbs were stiff with something colder than fear. A shadow passed across the ceiling. Slow, deliberate, then a whisper. Not words, breathing long and rattling. Inhale, hold, exhale. I turned my head inch by inch. There it stood. In the corner of the room, between two candles, the figure from the mirror. It had no face, just folds of gray, leathery skin where a mouth might have been. Its head tilted slightly, studying me. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't even blink. It raised a hand, long fingers like roots, blackened at the tips, and then, without sound, it pointed to the closet. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, carved deep into the wood, were symbols, the same as the ones below the house, fresh, bleeding, and behind the symbols, something moved. I blinked and it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the window as if nothing had happened. The candles had burned down to wax puddles. The closet door was shut, but I could still smell it, damp earth and rust. I packed a bag. I was ready to leave. But when I opened the front door, the world outside was gone. Just fog, endless, silent, absolute. And from the mist, a voice. You said you wanted silence. I shut the door and realized I wasn't alone in the house anymore. I never had been. Time had begun to slip. It was a subtle thing at first. I'd check the clock at noon, then look again, what felt like minutes later, and see it was nearly evening. I stopped trusting the sun. It rose too fast, set too slow, or not at all. Some days I couldn't be sure if it had ever risen. I started marking the walls with chalk, one line, for every hour I could track. By the third day, the marks no longer made sense. Lines disappeared. Some shifted as if drawn by a shaking hand. Others twisted into spirals in the dead of night. I tried to sleep, but dreams came for me in fevered waves. I'd wake on the floor or in the hallway, or once, staring into the mirror in the bathroom, my eyes open but my reflection unmoving. There was something else too, a change in the house. Rooms stretched longer than they should have. Doors led to places they hadn't before. Once I walked into the kitchen and emerged into the basement. Another time I tried to leave through the front door and found myself back in the upstairs hallway, the locked room standing wide open. It laughed at me. This place. One evening, or what passed for it, I heard music, a record playing from the parlor room. I didn't own a record player. The song was old, scratchy, a waltz. I followed the sound, candle in hand, down to the parlor. The fireplace roared, unlit. Shadows danced on the ceiling, out of sync with the candlelight. In the center of the room, a figure stood with its back to me. It turned. It was me. Not like a twin, not like a mirror. It was the version of me that never left the city. Sane, clean, alive. He smiled and his eyes were empty. I've been here longer than you think, he said. Then the record skipped and the room was empty. But I could still hear the music, playing in my bones. Somewhere, the house was winding a clock. And it wasn't mine. I thought I was alone until I found the names. They were written in charcoal, pencil, and, God help me, something darker. Hundreds of them scrawled across the walls of the attic, the basement joists. Even beneath the wallpaper in the hallway I had peeled back in desperation. Every name ended the same way, crossed out, except one, mine. It was fresh, still wet. The letters shimmered as if written in something alive. I touched it and felt warmth. I tore back more wallpaper, more names, dozens, then hundreds. I checked the old desk drawers, the floorboards, names etched with fingernails burned into wood, whispered into mold. There were dates beside some of them. They spanned centuries. This house had been feeding for a long, long time. That night, the hallway stretched. I walked for what felt like hours, following a trail of candle stubs. Each one flickered and died as I passed until I reached a door I didn't recognize. It was painted black. A different black than the rest of the house, wet and lightless, like a void. On the door, a name, mine. Underneath it, one word, stay. When I opened it, I saw a version of my life. The life I thought I'd left behind. An apartment, a desk, sunlight, through clean windows, but it wasn't mine. There were photos on the wall, pictures of me smiling with people I didn't know. Birthdays I never celebrated. A woman I had never met wearing a wedding ring I had never bought. I turned away, and the door was gone. Now the hallway was mine. The house had given me space, or perhaps it had started making room. I began avoiding mirrors. It wasn't just the reflections anymore. It was the timing. How they would ripple when I walked past, how sometimes they'd reflect a different room, an older version of the house, or worse, a newer one I hadn't yet entered. But the paintings were worse. I hadn't noticed them before. They weren't there when I moved in. I was sure of it. Now, framed portraits lined the staircase wall, dustless, pristine. Each one showed a person sitting perfectly still, expression calm, but their eyes moved. I watched one night. Hours passed, candle burned low. Then I saw it. A blink. Just one. Enough. I reached up to take one of the portraits down. It screamed. Not out loud, not in air, in my head. A shriek of anguish. Pain buried in paint. I dropped it, but it didn't fall. It remained perfectly mounted on the wall. That's when I realized the faces in the paintings weren't strangers. They were the names I'd seen on the walls. I could read them now. Beneath the paint, faint embossments etched into the gilded frames, one name caught my eye. Elizabeth Devaney. I remembered her from the town records I'd once scoured. The woman who disappeared from Lengkong in 1891, vanished from her home one stormy night. No remains, no answers. Hello, everyone.